Good morning, how is everyone? Excellent, thank you Dr. Guerra for the wonderful introduction. The title of my presentation today is Interpretation of Armonía within the Contemporary Mariachi Ensemble. I'd just like to make a few remarks before I begin. To Dr. Guerra and Francisco Rueda for their continued support and affording me the opportunity to discuss a topic that is very near to me. Thank you very much to both of you. Dr. Guerra, thank you. Thank you to the members of the Armonía Mariachi Aztlán on arpa, Jacob Contador. Guitarrón Adolfo de Santiago. On viola, Austin Rosales. Guitarra, Pedro García. And then on guitar, auxiliary guitar, Miguel Aguirre Jr. And also I just want to say thank you to Janeca Montes for letting me borrow her guitar for this presentation. Yeah. A warm round of applause for all of them. Thank you, compañeros, for joining me this morning. Thanks. Approaching this subject matter as a practitioner, educator, and now scholar within the mariachi tradition, I find myself continually grappling with how to contextualize and articulate all of the understandings that have been passed on to me by my teachers, mentors, and colleagues over the past 23 years of performing within the mariachi tradition. In my master's thesis that I wrote while I was a graduate student here at UTRGV, under the supervision of my academic advisor, Dr. Andres Amado, I focused on the armonía practices of the mariachi ensemble, analyzing the transformation of the performance practice of El Son del Cuervo over a 108-year period. I was able to argue, among other things, that what is popularly espoused as traditional mariachi performance practice, at least concerning the armonía, dates back to only approximately the mid-20th century, 1960s, 1955, as an initial point of standardization. Therefore, in this presentation, I will primarily focus on this period when I utilize the term contemporary. Here's the outline of what we're going to try to accomplish today in this very condensed hour. We're going to work on El Son del Pasajero, Las Tres Huastecas, and Yo Quiero Ser. And so when we're talking about interpretation of the armonía, anything that I give you is a point of departure. It's not the way it's supposed to be played, but it's supposed to give you options. Maybe things that you didn't consider before as armonías, as directors, things to listen for, things that I listen for as a musician, and hopefully there's many, many different ways. And at the end of this, I could just probably tell you, right up front, that it's not even what you play, realistically. Are the strums exactly the way they're recorded? Sometimes it has more to do with how you play something that makes a greater effect than necessarily splitting hairs over, is it a down strum or an up strum in most cases. So, without further ado, let's begin. And also, if you have any questions throughout this is for all of us together collectively to learn and experience from, please flag me down, tell me I have a question. My compañeros here in the armonía as well. If you have any questions, this is kind of a master class in the sense that you're going to see me rehearse the armonía. We've had maybe 5 minutes of interaction, right, on these pieces. So you're really going to see how I'm engaging and how I'd like to approach what I'm hearing from this section. For El Son del Pasajero, we have to acknowledge that son, the word son, just means sound. And this is a tradition found all over Latin America. Sones are not exclusive to mariachi or to Mexico. The son here, though, is a song form native to the mariachi tradition. It's one of the first types of music that mariachi ensembles perform. Under the mariachi designation of son, we can find son jalisciense, son abajeño, son planeco, amongst a bunch of others. Mariachi scholar Jesus Jauregui actually says that these labels, he just labels all of these as son de mariachi. For those of you who may not be familiar, the term abajeño indicates that these songs are from the southern or lowland areas of the state of Jalisco. Sones abajeños are amongst the most difficult to execute in the mariachi repertoire. Other sones abajeños include songs like El Cuatro, Las Olas, and Los Arrieros. They are marked by superimposed meters between sections and metric modulations that create intricately interlocking patterns. So let's talk a little bit just quickly about the form of El Pasajero. It's divided up, I think, into two main sections. The first one is a son abajeño proper, where we have a lot of mixed meter, a lot of hemiolas occurring between melody, rhythm, etc. And then the B section, which could be cataloged as a straightforward son jalisciense, which utilizes esquerdera. I have two examples of that right there. So you'll see, a lot of polymetric things happening. And the bottom is just. And as a point of departure here, I'm referencing the Mariachi Vargas recording from 1965, Sones de Jalisco. So what we're hearing is trying to kind of enact that. We're trying to elicit that type of sound as a point of departure. Whatever you decide to do after this is really just stylistic preference, if anything. Let's play through some of it. We can't play through all of it, let's play through some of it. That's a really good tempo, I think, to start off. That's a performance tempo for sure. Maybe if you're rehearsing it for the first time, to not take it as fast, but they seem to be pretty familiar with the piece already. And so now we're going to start working. I think there's three main sections already within the body of this work. First is the introduction, and that seems all well and fine. When we get into this pattern comes up a lot in some of the We'll talk a little bit more about how it's influenced here. Basically, what we're trying to elicit here is, can we hear the melody when we're playing? How would the melody sound directly superimposed rhythmically on top of what we're playing? Right? We have to think like melody players as armonia players, not only keeping the beat. And there's sometimes where we're going to push forward, push through the melody, let the melody stay behind. But for the most part, we should be able to kind of hear the melody in what we're doing. Let's start with, that's on C, B, C major. We'll start with the middle. 1, 2, 3, Right there, I would start off with the bass. I think the bass is going to give kind of an instance of overlapping. Try to play and overlap. Let the notes bleed through as if you were a harp. Go ahead. Un, dos, tres. Boom, boom. Up against a melody. If you're a melody player, I'm already thinking, okay, melodically, how is this going to interlock? How am I going to interpret on top of this sound? Start from the top. It feels almost like he's holding back. If I play particularly right, divided into that, it's going to sound pretty dry. Un, dos, tres. Dran da di da di da di dan, dran da di da di da di dan, dran da di da di da versus dran da di da di da di dan, 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 dran da di da di da di da di da di dan. Good. Armonías. You're gonna feel like the guitarón is holding you back a little. Don't be scared of that. But also that means we have to widen this a little bit. The note kind of is a little bit longer in duration. Think of the phrasing. Up front we have down, down, up, down, down, up. Instead of these straight patterns of down, up, down, up, down, up. That means that it's following the melody. And then all the other ones you can kind of forget about and leave those very static to hold the place of the guitarón. Let's talk about now where the voice comes in. We have the opposite. The down, down, up kind of pattern is going to be found at the end of the measure. The lighting, the rhythmic values into the next harmony. And with that, realistically what we're doing is, again, now we're phrasing on the back end after the voice. We take over melody when the voice is out. This is just a word of advice for any of you playing these types of songs. When you have this down, down, up strum, this rudiment, we always train it, right? We train it to where we have an implicit bias in the hand. But we're doing something like this, which is good, you know, if you're playing a son jalisciense that has a sesquitera. If you're playing something like this, you have to play through that accent. It's not really going to be a list like that. It'll give the inflection that you're slowing down, even if you're playing on time. Accurately, metronomically on time, the difference in the sound is going to feel like it's more anchored in the measure than what it needs to be. Section, we have voices, so you guys can bring down the level. Keep the intensity there. Keep a drone going. Don't segment too much with accents. Let's take it up to tempo. It's a little bit more direct, a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more flowy. You never really want to break the sound with too many accents in a song like this. The violins are doing a lot of rhythms that also keep going. There's connections everywhere, elisions everywhere. Now in this next section, it's probably going to be some of the most challenging things to line up. Right? The way I anticipate it is that there's a long break in the armonía before they're coming into the redoble section. And armonías, can you do this for me? The basic pattern here is in a compound meter. That's realistically how it interlocks rhythmically. Now what I'm hearing is a little bit more of, again, the bias in the hand. We practice our redobles with the accent in front. What's needed here is an accent at the end. Falling into the measure, right? Falling into the downbeat. And in sequences of two. So maybe think with me. 1 and 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Every time we hit 1, that's where we're going to put a little bit more emphasis. 1, 2, 1, 2. Notice that the redoble isn't compressed. It's very, very open. It's flowy. It's smooth. And it also gives that, remember we're talking about the bass overlapping? Boom. No break in the sound. We're going to have to connect like that. Or that's crazy. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So let's just hear the armonías. On C, where we initiate, we're already on C. Every other chord change also goes into the downbeat of the next measure. So we change a little bit late, the last strum of the redoble. So we start C. Is going to be probably the most liberal and the most open to interpretation. Everything else is going to be locked into the armonías, violines. We're thinking 1, 2, 1, 2 as armonías, guitar players. The violines. Or the other section. Locked into that meter while that's happening underneath or on top, however you would conceptualize that. And so when we have that and the voices, Güerita del alma mía, ay, 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 cuando me lleva a su casa para estarme todo el día, ay, 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 me dice lo que le pasa, ay, 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 tira, tira. If that armonía is kind of inconsistent, we're going to lose all of that voice. Now, to the guitarrón and the bass parts. The guitarrón can anticipate the first redoble after C, and then it comes in reaction. Boom, 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 boom. So you can go ahead and wait. It's a long break for you, right? Ay, 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 las uvas junto al camino. Bum. Okay. Bum, bum, and that's your. Ay, ay, ay. Bum, 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 bum. D, make sure to make contact with the screen on the downbeat so that you're already there. It's really difficult to go rest done, you're already in place. D, D, G, G, and the other ones are a little bit more. That will give you kind of the pulse, a little bit more direct and assertive pulse. Same spot. Get ready. Ay, 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 pasó que pasa otro día. Ay, ay, me lleva a su casa para estarme todo el día. Ay, 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 me dice lo que le pasa. Ay, 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 tira, tira. Seated on top of each other, we're going to give the idea, the impression that it's going to spin out of control. Now, if you want to really up the level here for the guitarrón players and the bass players, there's such a thing as, written statically, it's only doom, 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 every 2 or 3 compound. But if you really want to shape the phrase, because it's really not restricted by anything, the basses are not really restricted, you can start on that upbeat feel, swing into a 6/8, doom, 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 and when the cadential point hits of the harmonic progression, when we go back to C, you can reset the rhythm. Look at the bum, 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 G, G, A, D, 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 C, 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 G, G. You can shape those phrases many ways. Again, this is the interpretation of what's happening. And it shouldn't really affect melody on top. It's going to change the inflection. Maybe someone won't even notice. There's so many things you can do there. Again, quite challenging and a different way of thinking about how to interpret. Let's go through this section once and then we'll move on. First verse. Ay, 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 paso que pasa. No, not here. It's the bias in the hand. Instead of playing through the phrase. Push through. Don't think of it as a down. Those pulses are consistent. Me dice lo que le pasa. that's going to be where it's just a hair behind, but it's going to keep the pulse a little bit extended. So that's going to be something to work on. Just make a mental note of it. But another thing, why are we talking about overlapping bass lines? This is realistically because some of the aesthetic of the bass within the mariachi was constructed with a harp. And so with the harp, it's very difficult to selectively mute. Can you play some bass lines for me? And just let them ring over. Don't do anything. And that's realistically, the guitarron is way more portable, right? It has access to all 12 chromatic tones. In terms of when we're playing outside of the keys of tonic, dominant, subdominant, the guitarron is going to excel. But the real sound is the harp. That low G, an octave below. Go ahead and play a G for me, solo. That low G on the bass. There's a lot to do. If you're hearing the Mariachi Tepalcatepec recordings, the first bass line that goes in there is the harp. That's what sets the tone for everything. In Vargas in these eras, Arturo Mendoza was the one who carried the knowledge of how to play the bass lines for certain songs, most of the songs, and that was then passed on to him. Okay, so the harp is really integral to how the aesthetic of how the guitarron should sound. I mean, there's some things that you don't want to do with like very modern arrangements. You don't want them to bleed over, but for this type of music, I think it's more of like an expression, right? It's open to a lot of interpretation. So maybe that helps disambiguate some of that for some of you. Let's go ahead and move to. Okay. This is about 2 minutes, 6 seconds into the recording. Just subtle, don't make it obvious. Last time. Let's do that. Let's just take all the sound out of the auditorium. So what does it do? It makes the armonía, the harmonic foundation, get out of the way, and entry to the melody, a whole different section. Let's work through that other section. Here's where, I guess, interpretation for many of you with a standard son jalisciense, we can really do a lot with the bass line. A lot. When you have a descending line, do, si, la, go ahead and pull us down to that G rhythmically. Give it a no tan cuadrado. Do, 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 do. Dun, 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 dun. I can't wait to get to it. No sé. You gotta get there. There's a little bit of anxiety, like, I gotta get there quicker than everyone else. Just a little bit. On the 6/8 syncopas, that's going to come in useful. The 2/3, keep them straight. Anticipate the 8th note and then the quarter note. This is, again, not the way you're supposed to play a pastel, but one possible interpretation. What I feel is a little bit more effective is moving with the guitarron. So we'll play the first measure, and again, the bias in the hand, we're trying to square everything metronomically. Excellent. but we should also be able to shape it. So I want you to compress that measure, like you also can't wait to get to that downbeat, which would be the backbeat of the song, right? So instead of playing, you want to make it feel more like. So you're compressing that second measure, and when you get to that downbeat of the next measure, the guitarrón takes over, and then you have that space there. Why? Because maybe it affects the way we feel that the voice is singing. Ay, 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 me hiciste rapidera, ay, 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 me hiciste rapidera. Here. Si no me quieres hablar, hazme una señal siquiera, hazme una señal siquiera. Okay, todo está alineado, está bien tocado. Está bien, o sea, está alineado. But if you give that emphasis, it might give a different interpretation. Ay, 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 ay. Si no me quieres hablar, hazme una señal siquiera, hazme una señal siquiera. See, something else happened. We don't know really what it is, and when we listen to recordings, I think this is for all musicians, but I would highly encourage you, do not become desensitized or insensitive to what you're hearing. There's a lot of information there for us. I mean, we can go on for weeks. At one point when I was studying with Rafael Palomar, we spent like a month on La Negra. And then he's like, okay, you're 30% there after that month. I mean, there's just so much information that we take for granted. Do not become insensitive to very little things. For better or for worse, the road that you take to assimilate and internalize a lot of those musical concepts, whether they're intentional or not, are making you a better musician. They're growing your sensitivity, not just to yourself, but to your section and everyone else. And that's kind of what we're trying to capture here with some of these examples. So let's see if we can. Si no me quieres hablar, hazme una señal. Suéltate. No. Ding, ding. Hold them back. 1, 2, 3. Bam, 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 bam. Dan, dan, bam, bam. Ding, ding, bam, bam. Un poquito más adelantado. Don't worry. They'll give you that downbeat, and then no pasa nada. Like you forgot about what you just did. Every other measure. Si no me quieres hablar, hazme una. In this case, the way it's interpreted, very, very compact. We have to think of doom, and remember the guitarón. It's going to be rushing a little bit. We have to stay connected rhythmically, lyrically to it. Rhythmically, the rhythmic lyricism of it. Si no me quieres hablar, just vamos y yo. Tan siquiera, una señal siquiera, con tu modo de mi papi papá. Ay, 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 ay. It's just an effect. Chiquito los redobles, no tienen que ser toda la fuerza. It's just an effect. It's a phrasing, right? It's unsustainable to do it. I mean, you can, but why? Si no me quieres hablar, hazme una señal siquiera, hazme una señal siquiera, con tu modo de mirar. Ay, 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 ay. It's like I'm already anticipating where the guitarón is going to be. We're connected that much rhythmically. And then, let's start from there, and then, y ahí sí va a estar bien eso. I know that's going to be locked in. Yeah, I can read from other playing. Si no me quieres hablar, hazme una señal siquiera. Still a little bit behind. It's a little behind, just something to take note on. Okay, let's move on to another piece. Good. Well, when we were talking about this, Francisco and I decided to showcase a few different genres. So we're going to feature now the Huastecas. We're not going to get through the whole thing. We're just going to go through broad concepts here. But the huapango is a song form native to the Huasteco tradition. And like many other song forms found in the mariachi, the huapango has been absorbed into the repertoire. So we've made, and because of that, modifications are expected. So for this, we're going to be working with a piece arranged and adapted by Maestro Jose Hernandez, which also will be joining us in this conference. So I can speak generally here about what we're looking at. When you look at the Huasteco tradition, trio Huasteco. It's exactly that, it's just 3 musicians. And you have a jarana, a huapanguera, y un violin. There is no primary bass functioning instrument. So that's already a huge difference from that into what we're hearing here. We have primary bass instruments, and then auxiliary rhythmic lutes, and a hard drum. So all of these things, we're already making concessions already, right? We're already making adaptations to the tradition to fit the ensemble. Another thing that we're gonna have to remember is, there's extended techniques that are used like apagones and things like that within the Huasteco. The mariachi used to use in sones, doesn't use anymore as much. But what I'm gonna talk about is the rhythmic alignment. So something that's really particular about the Sol de Mexico way of playing, especially when it comes to guapangos, is this idea that the redoble is superimposed rhythmically directly on top of the abanico. Because if you really look at the guapango rhythm, the way it's laid out in 3/4 and 2 measures, the second half of the measure is exactly the same. And it's this. Whether we start that's the second half of the measure. So really where a lot of the arguments are going to, a lot of discussions are had between musicians and interpreters is going to be that first measure. So one thing that we can do here for the guapango is, I would say like 2 guitars, go ahead and do this rhythm over and over. Off like maybe near the end of that. Versus, it's a really good way to practice it. If you have a vihuela and a guitar, the guitars can play. Vihuela with me. If you hear something like a Leo Azteca that's at a much faster pace, a faster tempo, it's still the same principle. Instead of which also works, but it's not what we're used to hearing, right? And if you do, pay credence to the recording, Maestro Jose could have recorded that in any which way he wanted, and it's like that for a reason. So now you have like a different outlook for how to interpret a guapango. Maybe something doesn't feel right or sound right aesthetically. Well, we have these options. We have like 3-4 ways of doing things. Let's read through some of this. Let's just read through, I guess, the principal ones. Okay. Let's just start at the top, and we'll work through A. I think that'll be. 1, 2, 3. Let's think about one more playing like a downbeat on the 1. Which is omitted for most of the thing here on a chord. Like that one, let's go ahead and give a quick on that. So it's that concept of overlapping, right? Here I would focus on the apagones. Don't worry too much and get bogged down with the strums. It can sound sluggish. I mean, ideally you want to will be good. 1, after 3. 1, 2, 3, 3, 1. Feels like you're going to be anticipating it. And also something that I like to tell armonía players when we're learning the bando rhythm is your hand literally has to slow down in time to accommodate that. It's really kind of deceiving when we're playing all these eighth notes in time, and then all of a sudden you have to slow down to like a third of that. Your hand is literally reacting slower. That's a huge thing. We have to make that concession. Let's dig in a little bit more to those apagones. Just a little bit more. So let's start again. 1, 2, 3. 3. Directly right in the middle. If you start going da 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 da, you're taking up too much space. You have to play interlock with what he's doing. Let's start on A. 1, 2, 3. Let's get to the measure before. A7, and then redobles, but we won't play the redobles. Every other downbeat, remember where the guitarón is. Hatch it. Strong, light, strong, light, strong, light, done. One measure before, measure 24. 1, 2, 3. See how flowy that was? It's really smooth. We're not getting. If you want, just as a baseline to get the rhythm going. 1, 2, 3. What else? It's unimpeded in that way. Good. See how much? So realistically, I mean, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of, applying these concepts. And then within that, we still haven't even talked about phrasing, dynamics, tone. When I was listening to them rehearse a little bit, I thought it was a little loud, like very powerful through the whole thing. Always remember that even if you're mic'd up, you have a balance to maintain. And when there's a vocalist that comes in, especially in the middle high register, you can bring your volume down. You can always modify where your sound is, where your tone is, how much contrast you want, depending on the arrangement and what the arrangement calls for. And we are thinking like melodies, and I think that's one thing that's highly overlooked with the other movie. Let's look at one more example, and this will be just really brief. Yo Quiero Ser Fernández. In the mariachi tradition, like after that middle period, like 50s and 60s, we start seeing a lot of ballads and songs in different song forms, popular music forms, but we would call it Mexico, which term música popular, starts to hybridize a lot of the already existing mariachi kind of catalog genres. So hybrid genres begin to develop alongside famous ranchera singers. So ranchera singers are promoting these new types of song forms. We have bolero ranchero, tango bolero, Pedro Infante, Gibson, Jorge Negrete, and of course Javier Solís with the tango bolero. And here's one that's an outlier. It's really, really interesting the way that this was recorded. In the recording, there's 2 vihuelas and a guitarrón, and that's it. We have, really strong vihuela presence there. But the second, one vihuela's playing a chord, just vamping on those chords, and then there's a guido part. There's a prepared vihuela that has kind of a guido type sound, and it's playing alongside that. But how do we do that when we're playing with not 2 vihuelas, obviously? I would say that someone stays on guido, and then the other one doubles the vihuela part. That would be one way to do it if you have 2 guitars. If not, the guitar would do the guido part, and then the vihuela would do the chords. We play the chords as written. So we're placing all of these on top of one another and stacking the rhythm. The way it's written, the way I have it written, is that, again, the redoble is not going to have the weight on the front end, vihuela guitar. It's going to be again, so you let that note extend over. And I don't know if that was done like post, like in studio, but that's kind of the inflection. They kind of move the armonías into the background after that. It's probably a little bit more active, rhythmically active and louder. Really sink into that. Kind of a little. Setting the stage for that something's going to happen, usually that the vocalist is going to come in. Instead of playing through the entire piece extremely at a fortissimo. It goes down to, I wrote a mezzo piano, maybe then it comes up back up to a mezzo forte, if anything. And then back over, on letter C, can we start there? Or let's start at C, B. Second page. So those things that we have to react to quickly will help the interpretation, will help the singer. These contexts. Let's start again on 33, and we'll finish there. Why? Because they flow with the voice. Just that alone is going to open up a lot of interpretive possibilities. anyone have any questions? Oh, Dr. Guerra has a question. Yes. Oh, Himiola? Himiola is a superimposition of a 2 on top of a 3, whereas a sesquietera is an alternation of 2 and 3. So where you have a 1, 2, 3, da, 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 happening simultaneously. Whereas sesquietera is something like 1, 2, 3, ba, 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 1, 2, 3, ba, 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 ba. Sesquietera versus Himiola. Great question, Dr. Guerra. Anyone else? Any questions? Any observations? Comments? Concerns? Harmony? Yes? Yes, Mr. Woodman.
So the use of different harmonia patterns and things like that, do you think it's more, did it happen more so with certain arrangers that were introducing it into mariachi, or was it a general movement that was?
If we're talking about, like when things are starting to develop, I think it really is a combination of the arranger and then just kind of the studio musician as well. I mean, you have to remember that Javier Solis, where are the charts? What is left behind? I mean, I've asked, did you have a chart for Poeta Campesino? And like, no, we just maybe had chords for some sections, but that was it. And so a lot of it is the interplay. Maybe, there was something really specific that the arranger wanted, and in that case, there's a modification or an accommodation made on behalf of the studio musician. But also, how do you start to interpret and perform a rhythm you've never played before? Before Yo Quiero Ser, was that necessarily something that we would practice, right? If it hasn't happened before. And then we take that as kind of canon and move forward with it. So I think to answer your question again, I think it's going to be a very complex idea of who's arranging versus who. Rigor Alfaro would tell me things that when they would show up to do certain projects with Vicente, certain arrangers would say, well, there's not even any armonía, there's no lead sheet for armonía. And where's the rhythms? And the arranger would tell them, I'm not going to name the arranger, but the composer, the arranger would say, pues ustedes ya se la saben. And so right away, give me the pencil, let's start analyzing what chords are going, what is the bass going to do. Some of that stuff is done on the fly, some of these studio musicians are tremendous. So unless you're looking at maybe more modern, not contemporary, but hyper-modern things like Sergio Caratachea writes every single thing out. Right? And there is no give there. I mean, it is, Maestro Jose Hernandez, for the most part, is extremely detailed in what's to be given. A lot of other people, like you look at Pepe Martinez's scores, the guys from Armonía, al gusto, ritmo la viquina. However, maybe he trusts Pato enough. Pato knows what he's doing. I don't even know how many rhythms he's going to come up with unless I give him that liberty. Same thing with the bass lines. If there's a certain part where we need to stop, then that will be written in there, just those specifics. But other than that, it's up to the discretion of the player. And even those things begin to develop. I mean, Veracruz Dos was played live a lot before it was recorded. Violín Mapango, there's tapes that the Santiago brothers would record of the whole actual transformation of how we know Violín Mapango today. The very first tapes don't sound anything like what we're listening to. And then it was also borrowed from Violín Mapango, popularized by Maria de Lourdes. So all these things are constant transformation. These are just snapshots. These recordings are snapshots in time of, okay, where were we at this point? Why? We don't know. I don't like to take things for granted. And that's kind of why I'm doing this today the way I'm doing it. Trying to elucidate or bring about more interpretive sensitivity for the element. Was it thumbs up? Okay, so we're good. Any other questions before? Oh, Dr. Guerra? Thank you all for your time.